You can be anything you want to be. And I've got nieces and, I will say that to them. They're 14 and 17. But then actually, what are the actions that we're doing that support that statement?
Hello and welcome to the latest of a series of City and Guilds podcasts that we've set up to really highlight key findings from a recent research that we conducted on the younger workforce. This is a series that is designed to look at what's being done to support younger workforces and working in partnership with employers, young people and government, how we can all work together to really get the best from the younger talent we've got. We'll reflect on barriers in particular for young people as we go through the series, and today is designed to really think about younger women. We had 5,000 young people tell us what their experience was in our recent Youth Misspent research, and half of those were women that we polled. And there's some fascinating barriers that they spoke about, as well as solutions that we've started to uncover, and some of our panellists will talk about that. And of course, we have the 8th of March, International Women's Day, which is a really good moment to reflect on all the celebrating that we can do for women in the workplace, but also the challenges that continue. We've realised that there are some really important findings we need to pay attention to as we think about how we can support young women to reach their potential, earn what they're capable of earning, harness the opportunities that exist, and really think about, well, why are the stakes so uneven, actually, when younger women perhaps leave school with a higher education level than their male counterparts, yet they're not achieving in line with their male peers. So, unpacking all of that with me today are three fantastic panellists who are going to really reflect on some of those barriers and solutions. And my goodness, do we have barriers. The latest figures from the House of Commons Library give some signs of positivity, absolutely, with unemployment rates coming down slightly in the last year from 9.8% to 8.7%. But actually, there's so much more we need to be doing and so many more opportunities we need to be harnessing. And I'm really pleased that we're going to be able to reflect on that today with our panel, who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves. Evelyn, let's come to you first.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon or good evening, whenever you're listening. My name's Evie Bate and I am the head of our academy at Nestlé UK and Ireland.
And next, can I come to you, Kat, to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. So I'm Kat Sullivan, and I'm currently studying at Gen 2. So I'm in my third year of a control and instrumentation degree. So I'm actually studying part-time. So it's a 5-year course instead of a 3-year course.
Fantastic. Great to have you here. And Claire, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Oh, hi there. I'm Claire Rindle. I'm Chief Exec of Young Women's Trust. We champion young women aged 18 to 30 in England and Wales.
Great. So it's great to have you here today. I'm looking forward to some wonderful insights from each of you. And as I said, there is cause for positivity. Some of those unemployment rates are coming down slightly, but our research shows a lot of challenges too. And what I really want to get through today is, why is it that young women might be choosing particular careers that are traditionally dominated by men perhaps, or they're shunning other opportunities that could really kickstart their careers? And I guess I want to start by asking you, as our panel, what you think are the biggest barriers to young women that they face when it comes to getting into well-paid jobs in their careers. Lynn, let's start with you.
Thanks, Faiza. You sort of pause when you hear that question and you, I guess, have an assumption that the world's moved on or the world should have moved on. But for me, when I think about what, really is the biggest barrier, facing young women, I think the first thing is recognizing that there is still an issue, despite the fact we've been talking about this for, certainly a significant number of years. And I think for me, the biggest issue is the role of stereotypes still in society and how that's impacting on career choices. And we, when we talk to, females in our personal lives, in, parents, how they might have those relationships with their children, you'll hear a lot of the time people saying, you can be anything you want to be. I've got nieces, and I will say that to them. They're 14 and 17, but then actually, what are the actions that we're doing that support that statement of you can be anything you want to be? Everything else that those young women are consuming in terms of media, in terms of books, they hold the stereotypes still in a lot of cases. So it's more subtle, but it's more everyday. And I think that drip, 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 and the consistency of still the stereotypes that young women see in their day-to-day life is impacting, I think, more significantly than we believe. I would say in industry, we do have a really big part to play to support with real visible role models, to inspire young women to think about roles that they may not have previously considered as for them. And we also need to start much younger. So if I think about the work that we do in Nestlé, a lot of our work is aimed at secondary school, but that's too late. And I think we really need to start much earlier in talking to young women about career aspiration.
Evelyn, that's such a helpful response. Thank you. And Claire?
Well, I agree that certainly, undoubtedly, some of this is about, as you say, Faiza, young women shunning opportunities is the wording you used. And I think that is partly true, that comes about from all of the conditioning that Evelyn was talking about and the social messaging that young women receive from a young age. But I think we also really need to focus on the expectations and the practices of employers. And the discrimination is still rampant in the workplace. I mean, the Young Women's Trust did a survey last year with young men and young women, but we also spoke to 900 HR decision makers. And nearly a third of those were aware of young women being discriminated against in their workplace in the past year. And 1 in 10 of those HR professionals told us that young women were being paid less than men for jobs at the same level in their organisation. So there's a huge issue around pay, but also around progression. And 1 in 5 of those HR professionals thought men were still more suited to senior management positions than women, which is pretty shocking, 1 in 5. So it's pay and progression that are big barriers for young women when they get into the workplace. And people talk about the glass ceiling, but we often will talk about the broken rung in Young Women's Trust, which is really stopping young women getting onto that bit of the ladder and progressing up it and being able to use their talents in the workplace.
Thank you so much. And I really love the fact that you expanded on the shunning piece, because actually it's a tapestry of factors that come into actually feeling that confidence to go up on the ladder, climbing over those broken rungs. And that's a wonderful visual image. Thank you, Claire. And Kat, finally, your view on, the biggest barrier young women face when it comes to getting that well-paying job and getting that career kickstart.
I really think Evelyn sort of hit it on the head with her sort of idea of a subliminal message, sort of from being very, very young. Because I imagine if you asked a lot of children, like, who do you think of when you see an engineer? Or like, if you think of an engineer, who would you think of? And I think a lot of them would typically imagine a man. And I think that subliminal message, almost from being a child, that like an engineer is almost a man's job, is interesting. And I think it's definitely a stigma we need to consider in the future and sort of try get into schools younger and sort of get more women engineers into schools, sort of being like, no, this is a job we can all do, and just sort of overcoming that almost societal viewpoint that these sort of high paying careers they're for everybody, not just men.
Thank you, Kat. That's brilliant. What a profound view as well from you, having broken into that industry, starting to break into engineering as a young woman. And we'll come back to understanding more of your experience. The next section is on expectations and ambitions, really, and it's building on this theme of what stops young women getting up the ladder. Is it that broken rung? Is it that lack of confidence, the creativity that may not be there in a workplace that helps them understand how to get up that ladder? And when we all know we need support sometimes to feel that we can do what we're capable of. And so in our Youth Misspent report, actually, that rang true. And we found that 72% of young women, they want to earn a high salary, actually, versus 56% of men who rated salary as a key driver in looking for a new job. However, We found also that this is far from the only priority young women have when considering their career priorities, which is something I think employers may want to consider, with 53% also saying that they want a career that involves exciting and interesting work. They also want a role that was secure, and they want flexible hours, and I think these are things we all want actually. And if one of those things isn't in place, perhaps that is something that can, knock you a bit as you're trying to find a stable place in a work environment. So it would be great to get the thoughts of the panel on the kind of careers and industries that can meet those expectations, perhaps including some in which young women are currently underrepresented, that can help young women feel that actually that could be the employer for me or that could be the industry for me. So, Kat, I'd like to go back to you actually. And given, as we were saying, engineering is typically a male-dominated field, but also one which can offer high salaries and high opportunities and a career progression route, it'd be great to understand what drove your decision to consider a career in that particular sector.
I honestly can't say it was one specific thing. Just growing up, so I'm in the West Cumbria area, so we have a lot of science around us. There's a lot of science schools and employers in the area. So it was sort of an idea that I always had that engineering was a good place to go in my area. But it was also as well, it was just sort of what I naturally leaned towards with my skills. So maths, science, physics, engineering, they always came a lot more naturally to me than your humanities or your English. I was never the most eloquent, but I was always comfortable with maths. So I can't really say it was one thing, but it was sort of a mixture of things. And then there was a lot of people I knew who were already in science and engineering. So I had a lot more knowledge going into it about that sort of job.
That's wonderful, and I'd say you're very eloquent actually listening to you, but also just picking out that point that you made about social networks and knowing other people that perhaps made you feel like that's something I can do. And it's not something that all of us have sometimes when we're looking at a career. Evelyn, I'd like to turn to you now. Now, obviously, Nestlé is a huge organisation, a household name, and it employs a wide variety, has lots of roles. Are there any areas in particular which you would encourage young women to consider, which could offer them the kind of things that they've made clear that they're seeking, really? And how does the Nestlé Academy help young women to identify these opportunities? If you can talk a bit about that, that would be really, really great to hear.
Thanks, Faiza. Yeah, so I'll sort of take each of the areas in turn, really, in terms of what the research showed around what young women are looking for. And obviously, salary is the first thing. And we're very transparent about our salaries within the organisation. And obviously, we have our salary scales. They're published for everyone to be able to see. So as any employee in the organisation should know exactly where they are versus the role they're in and where their salary sits within that scale. We obviously are part of gender pay reporting, and we go over and above in terms of what the minimum expectation is within that to make sure that we are monitoring it. And we have two issues within our gender pay. One is about women at board level, and the other is about the representation of women in the operations field. So they're areas that we're working on, but as with any of this, it's not one thing and it's not an easy, simple fix. In terms of exciting and interesting work, I think for me, this comes down to how do you help people starting out in the world of work or within the world of work who maybe aren't being fulfilled to really understand who they are, what they love, and help them have a career that aligns to those things, because that's when people thrive and when people are at their best and when they're happiest, to be fair. So we use strengths-based recruitment for our early talent, and that's all about helping really find people who have the strengths we're looking for and they can be themselves when they're at work, because that's where you get the best out of people. So in terms of job security, which is another one of the things that was mentioned, obviously that's a bit harder to predict. But hopefully being a large organisation, we are able to provide a level of job security. And certainly we've coming out of COVID, we did see sort of applications increase because obviously being a large organisation, hopefully we can offer more security than maybe some smaller organisations can. In terms of flexibility, all of our non-shift workers are able to work flexibly. We have no core hours that people have to work. Basically, it's you've got contractual hours, and as long as you do your job and you do your contractual hours, how you go about doing that is really flexible depending on the role you're in, and people can accrue flex days as well, so up to one flex day per month, and a maximum of 12 a year. So it's done on a trust basis and a delivery perspective and the requirement of the role. In terms of the factory, obviously it's a bit trickier to have flexible working, so if shifts working is shift working. But we are trying to do some things within the factory environment that supports more flexibility. So we've got women and men both doing job sharing, and we do have part-time weekend working as well to start to try and bring more flexibility into that operations environment. In terms of what we do in the academy to really help people, I think there's a couple of things. One is we have a program within an organisation called Wild Heart, and that's an employability mentoring program where we do 4 modules with school students, really helping them understand about the world of work, understand what employers are looking for, understand who they are and how they can put their best selves forward when they're thinking about the career they want to go on. And I'll come back to the ladder analogy. We're targeting schools there with high proportions of levels of free school meals, pupil premium, and high levels of ethnic diversity. And the CEO of Wild Hearts talks about the fact that a lot of the children they work with, it's not about taking the next step on the ladder. They don't even know the ladder exists. So we're trying to help broaden horizons at that young stage and help people understand who they are and what they bring and what their magic is. And then when people are in the organisation, two real things really. One is engagement check-ins. So really taking the time to talk to people when they're in role to understand how motivated they are, what matters to them, and how well is their current role delivering against those things. And it becomes then a platform of a conversation to have with their line manager about things that maybe need work on. And then the final thing is for our graduates, they go through a development program. And one of the first modules we run with them is all about leading yourself, and recognises that, you know, as individuals, we are whole people. We're not a work person and a home person. And it really starts to try and get people thinking about self-leadership right at the start of their career.
Wow, that is such I was just scribbling as you're writing, Evelyn, and the real end-to-end approach from that pre-recruitment and strength-based kind of outreach right the way through to really thinking about how the experience in the workplaces and practical things you do, but also checking in, so important. And maybe one of the things that strikes me that it's that beginning to end kind of and in the middle approach. You seem like you're really, there's such a thoughtful approach to, I suppose, helping people find their place at Nestlé and continuing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And finally, Claire, it'd be great to hear about some of the proactive work that Young Women's Trust does to encourage young women to look at their career paths.
Sure. Well, we, as I said, we champion young women aged 18 to 30 across England and Wales. We provide practical support to help young women get into work and raise their incomes. And we also carry out research with young women to shine a spotlight on the realities of their lives. And we campaign with young women for equality in the workplace. In terms of the practical support we offer free professional coaching to young women in their thousands across England and Wales each year. And I love what Evelyn was saying about people need to understand what their magic is. And your Youth Misspent report shows the big gap in confidence that young women have, and they don't really know what their magic is and what they really love doing, and who they sometimes, you know, how their aspirations really can be opened up if they believed in themselves and had sort of broader horizons. And our coaching helps do that and gives young women that sense of their potential. And we often get that feedback from young women that they've wanted to apply for a different job after using the service. So that's the coaching, but we also give feedback to young women on their job applications and their CVs. Again, your report showed just how many young people are really uncertain about how to apply for work. and we help them with that. And we offer also a program of employability webinars. Some of them are kind of introductions to certain sectors that young women might not normally be in, like construction or tech, but also very practically focused on how do you write a great CV, get your LinkedIn profile working. And if I'm allowed a short plug, do anyone listening to this today who is a young woman aged 18 to 30, do check our website out, youngwomenstrust.org, because we'd love to hear from you. Perhaps you know a young woman who could benefit from our services. But it is just, as Evelyn's about saying, really about giving young women a sense of their potential and giving them more information about what the options are for them, so that they can really see their talents as something that can be equally used in cosmetics as it can be in construction, say.
Thank you so much, Claire. And of course you're allowed to plug. In fact, listening to you, I was thinking, is there any way that City and Guilds can help signpost to that? So let's take that conversation forward in another way if we can, because you seem to be able, what strikes me is also that 18 to 30, the transitioning point, the transitioning to adulthood, making career choices, making life choices actually, and how difficult that can feel, particularly if you're a young person who doesn't have support around you. So yeah, anything we can do to champion Young Women's Trust, really keen to do that. And so moving on, listening to all those insights from each of you, which have been really illuminating actually, I'd like to expand just a bit more now on some of the points you raised, specifically around what employers and government can do to support young women into the workplace, and including in those fields where they are currently underrepresented. Again, that's the cut through we want to create with our Youth Misspent research, is where are the really stubborn points where we can start to get some traction. So we found that, for example, 26% of young people believe that government is doing enough actually to support young people into employment, and 33% believe employers are doing enough. But within those statistics, young women were even less likely to feel they were getting enough support. So, you know, those statistics are about a third, and you have to ask yourself, what's the other 2/3 thinking about support from government and employers? And we know that those stats were even higher when you look at the young women that were responding in that poll that we did. So with this in mind, Claire, I'd like to turn to you to first talk about some of the work Young Women's Trust has done to encourage government employers to take more of an active role in supporting young women. We've certainly heard, you know, you're doing your bit. You've got those all those resources you talked about at Young Women's Trust. But actually, what more could employers and government do to support as well?
I think it's still quite shocking today to know that young women are taking home 1/5 less income per year than young men. And you can imagine what that's like in a cost of living crisis. So we're running a campaign right now focused on government. It's called Costing Our Futures. And we have 3 campaign asks. One is that the government extends the national living wage to those under the age of 23, and that they increase benefits. And thirdly, that they guarantee affordable childcare for the young women who are parents in this age range. So there are asks of government. If you want to support that campaign, we'd love you to do that. And you can sign our open letter to government on our website. But there's also things that employers can really do. And it's fantastic to hear what Nestlé has already been committing to, because some of that great practice is what we want to see more of. And I think there's 4 key things. First thing is advertising jobs with the salary details on them, and offer a range of flexible working options and put that on the advert. Sounds like Nestlé are doing that brilliantly. The second thing is supporting young women's progression in the workplace, offering mentoring and support to young women to help them get over that broken rung, particularly supporting your first line managers to do a really good job of championing young women that are working for them. Thirdly, tackle that discrimination that we were talking about by age and gender, but also really thinking about what it means to be a young woman of colour, disabled young woman in the workplace. All those kind of, the discrimination compounds one another and makes that experience of being young and female particularly powerless. And I think there's things that employers can do, as we talked about before, given the extent of the discrimination that we're seeing in the workplace. And whatever your policies are and however good you think your practices are, go and ask young women what they think. Does your annual staff survey get cut down by age and gender? Do you understand what young women are really experiencing in your workplace? Are you doing exit interviews where you ask young women why they're going, to really see whether the things that you think you're doing well, are they really making a difference? Can you celebrate what's working? Can you challenge yourselves to do more? So I think there's lots of employers out there like Nestle who are really taking some of this on, but there's obviously, as you can see from the report, so much more to do.
Thank you, Claire. That's really, really helpful. And Evelyn, we've already touched on the Nestle Academy and the work that's going on to help young women identify their career strengths. Are there any other initiatives your company is currently carrying out to support young women in developing their professional skills, or in proactively reaching out to young women starting out in their career journeys? Some of that advice that you gave was so helpful, and I wondered if you could help other employers who might be thinking out about how they support young women to start out on their journey, and how, I suppose, they show up as employers for that group. Any tips you've got?
Thanks, Faiza. So firstly, what I'd say is that we're doing some things. Clearly, we need to do more, but I'll share some of the things that we are doing to really help young women starting out in their careers. So one of the things I just wanted to pull out is a partnership that we've had with an organisation called the STEMet. One of the big areas for us within the organisation, as I sort of mentioned earlier, is about females moving into sort of STEM subjects, particularly for us into engineering and manufacturing. And the STEMets, their ambition is all about inspiring young females and non-binary individuals around the opportunity of a career in STEM. So we've worked with them for the last year. 2 things we've done with them. One was a hackathon, which was all about giving people access to a sort of a project-based day, if you like, to help them understand more about the type of work that they could do if they were to come into a manufacturing or engineering role within any organisation, wouldn't have to be Nestle, to help inspire them around and excite them around the work and the opportunity that presents. So there's about 60 people that went through that programme, supported by people from the Nestle organisation. The other thing we've done is through that partnership is around mentoring, and Claire did reference this. So we had some female engineers from our business mentoring some young females from the STEMettes who wanted to go into engineering as a career. So it's mentoring by females for females to help them make that transition. And we've had some initial feedback about that and the positive impact it's had, but we're still sort of in that program at the moment. Some other things we're doing within Nestle. So we do gender balanced hiring. So there should be gender balanced shortlists for our interviews. We have gender balanced succession plans, and we have KPIs around gender within our organisation as well. So steps to move us in the right direction. The last thing I just wanted to mention is something we are starting to do, which is about trying to get more female role models, talking to young students. So within that, obviously males and females, but we are trying to encourage some of our female board members to do what we're calling coffee with sessions, where they tell their stories about how they've got from where they started out in school, and how they've progressed to be on the board here at Nestle, to inspire the next generation. In the organisation, we have gender networks, we've got buddies, we've got mentors, so all those things to help. And in terms of advice for other employers, I think for me is you need longer term aims. There's always short term pressure, but unless we start to have a concerted effort across industry to build this for the long term, we're all fishing in a very small pond, and we need to work together to make the pond bigger with more fish in it, and that's a collective responsibility.
Thank you, Evelyn. And if I can just mention a coalition that City and Guilds is a part of and founded, it's the Future Skills Coalition, in a way that we're trying to get more employers, skills providers, government, the political parties of every colour on board. Exactly as you say, with that, all playing our part so we get more fish in that pond, but also and have the skills that those fish need. I'm taking the analogy a bit far, but actually just really, really investing, I suppose, in our future workforce, which is, I think, what that points to. Fantastic. Thank you. And finally, Kat, as someone who is in that position where you're taking those first steps into work, actually, being a younger woman, we've got your really valuable insight here on this topical issue. Is there anything you particularly look for when you're when you be thinking about an employer and who you think will support your career goals as you develop in your journey?
Thank you. Especially for me, when I was sort of looking, I was coming straight out of sixth form. So I was really looking for an employer that had a sort of list of things I wanted. So I knew I wanted to get a degree. I knew I wanted to be properly educated, but I also knew that university itself, especially because we were still in the pandemic and there's not many universities in my area, I knew it was going to be difficult to get to a university. So I was able to get onto a degree apprenticeship, so studying 1 day a week and working the other 4 days. And that was just it's a really beneficial scheme for me because you get sort of both sides of the coin almost. And that was something very important for me to do. So looking for an employer that offered that and offered a course I was interested in was vital for me. And moving forward, it'll be looking for careers and ideologies that I like within other departments.
Thank you, Kat. So thank you, panel, very much for all those answers. And we've talked in the earlier section about what employers and government can do to support young women in the workplace. But I'd like to touch a bit more now on whether we believe the education and skills and career sectors are doing enough. Our research has certainly found that 36% of young women agreed strongly that actually those experiences hadn't equipped them with the skills they need to get the job they want. And I know Edge Foundation have also recently researched with younger people across the secondary system. I think the report's called Schools for All, if you want to check it out. And they've been talking very much about how equipped people are with the skills they need and supported to achieve in the system. So, Evelyn, it would be great to hear from you to give an employer's perspective, I suppose, and what you think needs to change to address that.
So I think that the first thing I'd say is that there is a real varying level of support in schools, and working with schools and working with some of our partners, you see the differences between schools that are really engaged behind supporting their students with career development and those that don't necessarily have the resource or the capacity to do that. So I think that is the first thing. That needs to be a standard, and there needs to be a consistency in terms of that level of support that young people are getting within the school setting. I think the other big thing is that there is a real mismatch between what young people think employers want and what we actually do want. And I think we need to, as employers, need to be more explicit and make it more accessible and available for young people to understand what we're actually looking for. Because if there's a mismatch, it's because we're not communicating well enough. And I think we've got a real responsibility to do that. And certainly, what we try and do within Nestlé is for all of our early careers opportunities is we provide preparation tools for people that help them understand about the way we do recruitment, to help them practice it, but also to understand what it is we're looking for. But I don't think it goes far enough. So I think the last thing I'll add within this is about the role that we play as employers to support careers services, which I've probably already touched on, but also parents, because they are such big influencers in the decision-making process. And that's definitely an opportunity for us.
Thank you, Evelyn. Just going back to some of the things you've been talking about, perhaps from a different perspective. Kat, obviously you've been developing specific vocational skills at Gen 2, but I'd like to know, was it easy to find this opportunity? Were you encouraged by your school, career services? I know you mentioned earlier that you knew people pursuing careers in engineering and STEM. And if you could just explain a bit about the changes you'd like to see in helping people understand how to gain those skills and what's out there.
Yeah, of course. So for me, I always knew there were a lot of opportunities in the area. I didn't specifically know what opportunities they were, but from being quite young, I did know they were there and they existed. And again, it was sort of using that network of people I already knew and sort of careers advisors in school that I was able to find these opportunities. So I was very much encouraged by my school, almost from like GCSE age. They could see what I was good at and what I was interested in, and I had a few really supportive teachers who sort of said, I think this would be good for you, I think this would be good for you, and sort of pushed me to do different things outside of school as well, which definitely came in useful down the line, especially with Gen 2, some of the vocational skills we do. I already had a foundation from sort of opportunities I had in sixth form and GCSE. And I would say it would be lovely to see a lot of other schools and other universities, colleges, sort of implementing that sort of, I don't know how to describe it, sort of this framework of sort of pointing out which students are sort of showing that they prefer to do this, and sort of encouraging that more. I know a lot of focus when I was in sixth form was university. So I think the sort of change of you don't have to do university would be beneficial, but I think that change is sort of slowly happening just in attitudes, sort of nationally anyway.
Thank you, Kat. And yeah, I think actually UCAS in particular is also now advertising lots more courses that alongside the university degrees that people can go for. So I do hope that changes. It's great to hear you think it's happening, and I hope we get more of that, more of those pathways to different routes for people. And finally, Claire, it would be great to get your perspective as well on where the education, skills and career sectors can do more to make sure young women completing their secondary education have the skills and experience they need.
Yeah, I think three quick reflections for me. One has been said before, really, about the need for good careers advice that is really tailored to individuals and challenges those stereotypes to try and counteract that. What's happening at the moment is this sort of funneling of young women into low paid sectors like education, health and care, retail, and then young women then finding it very hard to exit those sectors into higher paying areas of the economy. I think the other thing that struck me from reading your report, Youth Misspent, was about how few young people have had work experience. COVID obviously really affected that too. So I think that well-structured paid work experience, particularly for young women in male-dominated sectors, would make a big difference. And young women also talk to us about needing flexible study and training options that fits around their caring responsibilities, their mental or physical health needs. And I think we need to see more of those in order to enable young women to get the skills they need to progress.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to Kat and Evelyn for your input on that last question. It's been really interesting to hear from all of you about the experiences and the tips you've got for engaging young women in the workplace and entering the workplace, and also the experience in the workplace, and the wider challenges and solutions that exist still, actually, as we celebrate International Women's Day, something for us all to reflect on. And whilst sadly we're coming to an end actually of this podcast, I'm going to ask you a magic wand question if I can. So waving your magic wand, if you had just one thing that you would change, I'm going to give you 20 seconds each of you to come up with an answer on one thing you would change to ensure that young women are given the opportunity to reach their full career potential. And I'm going to go to Evelyn first.
So I come back to Claire's point that she made earlier about 7 out of 10 girls believing that they're not good enough or don't measure up. And my magic wand would make every young woman in this world have the belief in their potential and the ability to go after it.
Wonderful. And Kat?
20 seconds is short, but I would say that's my magic wand would be more support groups. So I take part in a group within my department that is females and male allies, really encouraging women to get the higher paid jobs, get into the department, everything like that. So more of them groups and more advertisement for them groups, I would say, would help out.
Thank you. And Claire, final word on your magic wand.
Oh, well, if I would be allowed to cheat and have a magic wand to end sexism, I'd do that. But failing that, I would have a magic wand to ensure that we pay and promoted young women on merit alone.
Thank you. Wouldn't it be wonderful if all those things happened? So I'd love to say a very big thank you to all of you for joining me here today in one of the podcasts we're doing here at City and Guilds to really highlight the challenges and experiences for the younger workforce. We know that young people as a group are facing a challenging time in entering the workplace, but it's also really clear and heartening from this conversation there are things we can do. Some of those might be magic wand things that are harder to achieve and you know, won't happen overnight, but so many things that you shared are things that are, you know, we can make happen. They're possible, and they're possible now, actually. So it's really, really, really great to hear those experiences and tips. Thank you all again for participating, and thank you to our listeners for joining us today. If you'd like to hear more, or you'd like to take the opportunity to subscribe to this ongoing series from City and Guilds exploring the challenges for the young workforce, please do so. If you have any comments or questions, you can reach out to us on social media channels like LinkedIn or Twitter. We're at City and Guilds on Twitter, and I'm at Tweet Faiza on Twitter. That's Faiza, because it's an uncommon name, and really share your experiences with us and what you think could work. This is about us all championing younger workers and their experiences. It's time for us to sign off now, but I hope that this podcast has given all our listeners some valuable insights into the unique challenges facing young women during the workforce today. Thanks very much, everyone, and we'll see you again at our next podcast.